What do you think of what he's bringing to the sport? Do you think it hurts, or
I think it's
or do you
both.
think it helps?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think it's good and bad. I think the good is that there's new eyes on the sport that wouldn't be on it otherwise. Not that I think very many of those give a shit about other boxers, but I don't think it's I think it's a good thing that they're seeing who's on the undercard. I thought that he was obviously part of promoting like one of the biggest women's fights ever, and it was a great fight. It wasn't just a great women's fight; it was a great event. Um, so I think
I
those.
thought it was. I thought that was the fight of the year, bro. Like in my
Yep,
opinion, I was like, yo, this is ridiculous, male or female. I don't give a fuck. You
facts.
know, yeah,
But so I think that's the good. I think the bad is there's a couple layers, right? But I think the influencer boxing thing that's going to become more common, and it's going to be an even more watered down version of what he's doing. So it's going to be, I think that's going to be dangerous. I think people are going to get hurt because they don't realize that you can't play boxing. And I think new fans are going to get it conflated to where they actually believe that Jake Paul can beat Canelo. They actually believe these things are real, and that's fine. Have fun with that. But I think when I go on ESPN and there's two articles about quarterbacks that fought each other and video guys that play video games on Twitch that fought each other, and there's another Jake Paul, it's like I don't fuck with this shit, bro. And it's cool if other
yeah,
people want to fuck with it, but this confusion about that it's the same thing. It's not the same thing, bro. These guys will get
yeah.
killed. These guys will literally get killed if they fight real fighters. So, and I'm not saying that Jake Paul has no boxing ability, but if he had to do any of the same kind of come up that the average fighter would have to do, I would respect it more. But he has fought 40-year-old wrestlers with hip replacements, right? He's fought basketball
Yeah.
players and he's fought again guys that play video games on Twitch. I like my chances against all those guys too. So, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't get why people are jerking this kid off all the time.
What I say is this: is I don't have a problem with what he's doing. I have a problem with people's reaction to it, right? So, and I think that's kind of what you're saying, right? Like it's the, just like there was this card this past weekend where like you said, you've got all these social media guys, YouTube stars fighting each other. I think we there was the who was it the two running backs, Adrian Peterson and Le'Veon Bell, were fighting. That's dangerous, right? Because these guys, it's basically a glorified tough man competition, is what you're getting now. And people thinking, oh, that's real boxing. That's the dangerous part. It was dangerous when Tough Man was doing it, right?
Yep.
Because literally you could show up that night in your, cut off shorts and wife beater, and they give you some, hey, sign this and go fight, right? It's basically that on a bigger scale, better production. But I think what Jake Paul is doing for the sport is good. I think that people's reaction to it is, like you said, people are saying, "Oh, well, he can beat all these." No, no, he can't. And I think he knows that, right? Like
But also I think the and I'll let you finish that point, but I think the argument that somebody watched Jake Paul, right, and now they're interested in Jaron Ennis from watching Jake Paul. That's not reality.
no, but I do think that people people are paying attention to the women's sports, women's boxing, that weren't paying attention to it before Jake Paul, right?
Hell yeah.
I think that Serrano fight and that fight may, even though Clarissa Shields is, she calls herself the GOAT, right? Even though she's that, look at how much more people are paying attention to her fights. You know what I'm saying? She had to go to MMA to get fans, right? She had to cross over. She had to do something that most guys in boxing don't have to do or will never do just to get fans. Serrano was a what 7-time champion in 7 different weight classes. We're talking about one of the most decorated female boxers of all time. Jake Paul had to come in and say, "Hey, pay attention to her," right? So I like that part of it, where people are
I
actually
do
starting to
too.
pay attention to people that weren't getting attention before that. Because like we said, Serrano Taylor fight was like fight of the year kind of shit. If he has more of the Boots Ennis kind of guys on his cards, then maybe we can bring some attention to some of these guys
I just
who
worry
aren't
about
getting love.
I hear you, but I worry about a model of boxing where every card, the main event is a celebrity, and then the real fighters are like the side hustle. And that's scary to me because I think more people right now would pay to watch Elon Musk box than they would to watch a lot of boxers. So I could see a world where you just have like wealthy celebrities fighting in main events against, fucking video game characters or whatever they do. And then the real fights are the undercard. That's not a model of boxing I'm interested in.
I think it's gonna go away. Like I personally, I feel like it's going to do what the tough man did. Right? It's gonna get popular for a minute, right?
But
Like
go think
it'll be
about that though.
popping, but then it goes away.
More people would invest money to watch Elon Musk versus Jeffrey Bezos than
Oh
an
yeah,
actual fight, right? That's always going to be there. And
oh yeah.
if boxing is going to always only be beholden to the dollar and not the fans, the ones that actually make the fights happen in a sense, that's the model you're going to get. Is it's going to get so much worse than Jake Paul. You know
I
what I'm
mean,
saying?
you look at it back. I mean, back in the day, right? Those tough man fights. Who was it? Refrigerator Perry was in there fighting dudes. Like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And it was like Butterbean. Let's face it. Butterbean made his bones off of fighting bums, literally off the street. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So yeah, to your point, yeah, it's always gonna be there. Is Butterbean a top 10, heavyweight champion of the world kind of conversation? No, he is what he is, right? I think Jake Paul is what he is. I think these YouTube guys are what they are, and it's gonna go away. It's gonna be dangerous while it's out there, right?
It's not though
But I
because
think it goes away.
Butterbean
I
could
think it goes. I think the popularity of it goes down. I think it'll always be around, right? But I think it's not going to be as popular as it. People lose interest in that eventually. I think, and then it'll come back around. Somebody famous will
My
fight again.
concern is that it's resonating so well with non-boxing fans that it's going to overtake real boxing. Go on ESPN right now, bro. How many articles and pictures are of guys that aren't fighters? Most of them. Like I think if we're not careful, it's going to get real fucking weird. And I think Floyd and Conor McGregor have a piece in that also.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you look at what Floyd's doing now, right? I mean, he's
He got a
fighting.
piece in it.
Yeah, he's fighting exhibitions and they're paying him more or as much.
He didn't even fight the good Paul brother. He fought the other Paul brother, you know?
Right. And here's another thing. I do want to. You brought that up, bro. Floyd Mayweather is 160 pounds soaking wet now that he's retired. You know what I'm saying? He used to walk around. People don't understand this. The reason his career was as long as it was because he walked around at his fighting weight. He didn't have to cut 30, 40, 50 pounds to fight, right? It's the reason he was able to fight as long as he was. A lot of guys lose that these days. But the point I'm trying to make is that Floyd right now, out of shape Floyd is 160, 165 pounds, right? Soaking wet. He's fighting a guy who's north of well over 200 pounds, right? That's the thing that to me is scary. A lot of people are going to think they can do that, right? These YouTube guys, I mean, look at when Jake Paul fought Nate Robinson, right? Nate Robinson's half his size. Like, yeah, he's a former pro athlete, but he's a former pro basketball player. Anybody who saw that fight, it looked like Nate Robinson learned how to box that day. You know what I'm saying? Jake Paul had been boxing for years before he fought Nate Robinson, right? And it showed. And Nate Robinson was again what 170 pounds, tops. He's fighting a guy who's 205. There's weight classes for a reason, right? Floyd Mayweather can do it because he's, arguably the best boxer of all time. He's definitely one of, if not the best in our era, right? Yes, he can fight a guy who's 205 because he knows what the fuck he's doing. You can't, right? If you're a YouTuber and you weigh 150 pounds, don't sign on to fight another YouTuber who's 220, right? I don't give a fuck how nice you are with your hands in the street. You are going to get hurt, and you are going to get hurt bad, right? And that's the thing that scares me the most. You want to put guys in there that weigh the same, look the same, whatever. It's when you start getting in that disparity of size and weight just because it's gonna get likes and clicks and all that shit, that's when it gets scary. Or you take people who have absolutely no idea how to fucking throw a punch, right? Like what was it, a couple years back they had the Kardashians fighting people. Whoa. You know,
But
Kim Kardashian is
that's
nice to
where I
look
think
at, but
it's headed. That's where I think it's headed, bro. That's what I don't like about what he's bringing to boxing is I do believe that ultimately people are less interested in boxing and more interested in aside from boxing fans like us, most people are more interested in seeing people they know box than watching high level boxing. And I personally think that if we're not careful, boxing is going to become cards that are headlined by celebrities, and the real fights are the undercard. They're the side hustle. They're the afterthought. I think we're
but see,
moving in that
here's
direction.
where I want to separate that, right? I honestly think Jake Paul really wants to bring more attention to some of those, the boxers, right? I mean, because again, we saw what we did with Serrano Taylor, but it's the reaction to people. They're like, well, it's Jake Paul. I want to see Jake Paul and whoever he's fighting, right?
Don't you
It's
think you could do some of that though by fighting a boxer?
I think you should have fought Hasim Rockman. Like I think that whole thing was a debacle. To be honest with you, I think that fight didn't go through because he realized Rockman could whoop his ass. You know what I mean?
But that's what I'm saying. Is that whole thing even good for boxing? That overtook the whole narrative when there was big fights going on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we're
Now
talking
he's
about,
fighting what, Anderson Silva,
yeah.
who's in his 40s,
And
and an
that's by
MMA fight.
far the most credible fight he's ever had. By far.
Because Anderson Silva actually used to box, like legitimately.
He beat Chavez.
Yeah,
He
and
beat
he
Chavez Jr.
Anderson Silva can legitimately box. I'll give him that.
Sure.
But is Anderson Silva beating any other boxer right now? So is he fighting anybody in the top 20?
I don't
Anderson Silva.
know. I don't know. But I think the other like main thing that is frustrating to me about it is there's so many boxers that have athletically achieved so like way more than Jake Paul, right? Guys that haven't even turned pro that have done way more than he'll ever do. And any card that he's on, he's making the most money. And it's again, you're not tying the pay to your achievement, you're tying the pay to your popularity. So that's where I think boxing's got it fucked up, you know?
You can take that pretty much in any sport though, bro. Like how many times have we seen football players get contracts we didn't think they deserved because they were popular football players, right? Or they had one good season where you take a guy who's been consistent for 10 years, but he might not have the big year, right? But he's been consistent. He doesn't get the big paycheck. Or NBA players, right? NBA players, guys in Major League Baseball, soccer. I think you can do that in any sport. But, you look at Ryan
It's
Garcia,
not
right?
as exaggerated though. Ellen DeGeneres doesn't play for the Yankees for a night, you know?
Yeah, this is true. Yeah. But you look at Ryan Garcia, right? A lot of people say the reason he's getting the fights that he has is because of his social media presence. There's this guy in UFC. He's getting a lot of the fights he gets because he colors his hair different. He's on social media. I think guys are using that now because, like it or not, it's kind of the world we're in now, right? I'll be honest with you. I didn't have Instagram before I came on the ITR. I just did it. You know what I mean? Because I didn't need it for anything else. Now I've got Twitter, IG. I've got all the. Why? Because guess what? It's the way the world works. You know what I mean? To reach, especially fans in their 20s and younger, or even people in their 30s now, you've got to kind of have a social media presence to gain, popularity. And I think that
And I don't have a problem with that. I guess my problem with it is if you don't have that, I don't think that should hurt you. Like the sport of boxing should be a sport the way every other sport is. Like if Gronk is popular because he's on TikTok, that's fine. But another great football player is still going to get paid to play football. You know what I'm saying? Like
right.
he's not hogging all the slots.
It's a hit or miss, right? Because everybody knows who Gronk is because he's Gronk, right? Not necessarily. There are people who know who Gronk is who don't know he plays football.
Right.
You know what I mean? There, everybody knows LeBron James plays basketball, right? But how many kids that that are coming up now know LeBron James from the Space Jam movies, right? They never watched him play basketball. They watched the movie and they're like, "Oh, okay, cool. He's cool." Same with Michael Jordan. There are kids who've never seen Michael Jordan play who are wearing his shoes right now today, right? It's the same kind of model, but yeah, I mean, I think that in boxing, as a purist, right? I'm with you. By the way, I agree 100%. I want to say that first. I think one of my favorite things back in the day was watching Friday night fights. Nobody knew who the fuck any of those guys were, right? But they
Shit was
put on some of the
bad.
most entertaining fights, right? One of my most favorite fights was Mickey Ward and Manuel Augustus. It was
Bro, Augustus is my fucking guy, dude.
right. And you look at his record, right? It was the most trash record. But when you look at a lot of his losses, split decision, split decision, split decision, split decision, and he's losing these fights to guys he beat, but because they're the prospect, they're getting these dubs, right? And he's beat not and I've seen some of his fights where he whitewashes the dude and gets, a loss. So, I think he had like 36 losses, to 38 wins. But I'd watch him every single fucking time he's on television because you're going to get a great fight out of him at least. You know what I'm saying? But you don't have, to your point earlier, how many guys now have 10 losses in their fights are on TV?
Not that many, bro. It's not very common anymore. But
Right.
that's the other thing too. People don't understand. I use this word lovingly. A lot of jobbers can fight, bro. A lot of
Yeah.
jobbers can fight. And that's the other
Yeah.
thing too. If Jake Paul fought one high level jobber, I'd probably shut the fuck up. But he doesn't do that. He fights Twitch gamers. So it's just that I think that's where I come back to is everyone's hyped him to be this thing like he could be a world champion and it's like I haven't even seen him in with just like a gym rat. So what am I getting excited about? I don't know.